I'm going to tell this story called The Dauntless Girl. Now, a long time ago in England, there lived a farmer who had several sons and a young daughter. And he was always proud of his daughter because he claimed she wasn't afraid of anything. Living or dead, day or night, she'd be out there. And one night, he had his friends, the blacksmith and the miller, in his kitchen, and they were sharing a few drinks. And he was boasting, as usual, about how brave and fearless his daughter Mary was. And the blacksmith said, "She's just a little girl. I don't think you can send her out in the dark. She's as afraid as anybody else." And the farmer said, "I'll tell you what. I'll make you a wager. I'll give you a gold guinea if you could come back next week and name a place where my girl won't go. She's worth all of my boys put together." So the blacksmith and the miller excused themselves, and a few days later they hurried down to the village church. And they got the vicar to give them the key to the dead house, which is the crypt beneath the church where all the old bones were. And then they went to see the sexton, the old caretaker of the churchyard. And they said to him, "We want you to help us play a trick on the farmer's daughter." He said, "Why would I do that?" And they said, come on, there's half a gold guinea in it for you." And right away he became much more willing to play a prank on a poor young girl. So they said, "You just hide down there in the crypt and make some ghostly noises, and we'll just scare the dresses off, the clothes off that girl." So a week later, the blacksmith and the miller went back to the farmer's kitchen, and the farmer said, "Well, what have you got?" And the blacksmith said, "We can name a place where your daughter won't go. We'll wager that she won't go to the dead house under the church and bring us back a human skull." "All right, Mary, would you come in here, please?" And in came Mary. "Yes, Father." And he said, "Would you please go down to the dead house beneath the church? We've left the door unlocked, and bring us back a human skull." "Certainly, Father. Is that all?" "Yes, go on now. It's almost midnight." And she threw on her shawl and her bonnet, and off she went. And she got there, and she went down the steps, and the door was open. And she looked in. Oh, it probably opened this way, didn't it? And she saw a skull bone, a nice round one, and she picked it up, and the sexton was hiding behind the door and shouted, "That's me father's skull! Put that back!" "Sorry," and she put it down, and she picked up another skull, and he said, "Leave that! That's me mother's skull!" "All right," and she put it down, and then she picked up another skull, and she said, "I don't care if it's your father, mother, son, or daughter, I'm taking it to my father." And she slammed the door shut and locked it and walked off home. And a little while later, the door opened where the farmer and his friends were waiting, and weren't the blacksmith and miller surprised when she walked in with this skull in her shawl? "Here you are, Father. Will that be all?" "Yes, I'll have you return it later, honey. Good night." "But wait, they said to the girl. Weren't you afraid? Were there any ghosts or..." "Oh, yes, some poor old ghost was shouting about his father's skull and his mother's skull, but, well, I'm not afraid of him. He's dead and I'm alive, so I shut the door and locked it and came back here, and you should have heard the screeching and howling when I did that as I went up the stairs." The miller and the blacksmith looked at each other, and they quickly excused themselves, and they ran all the way to the churchyard, and they went down the steps, and they opened up the door, and there, lying face down among all those bones, was the body of the poor old sexton. And thinking him dead, they dragged him up the steps and laid him on the ground, and he began gasping and clutching his heart. And they took him to the doctor, and he survived, but he was never really the same. But as a result of that night, word got out everywhere about just how brave and dauntless and fearless Mary, the farmer's daughter, was. And a few weeks later, there was a knock at the door, and when the farmer opened it, there was the wealthy squire of a big manor house a few villages away. And he said, "I've heard a lot about your daughter Mary and how she's afraid of nothing, living or dead." "That's my Mary," said the farmer. "What can I do for you?" "I can't keep any servants in my house. You see, my mother died not long ago, and her ghost won't rest. It sits down at the dinner table, and while you can't see her, you can see the forks and the knives moving up and down, and no one will stay. and I thought your girl might want to come and work for me." So the farmer told Mary, and although she was sad to leave her father's home, she was delighted to get such a fine position. So she went off with the squire to become his serving girl. And the very first night, the very first supper, she set the table, and she was sure to set a plate for his late mother, and pile it with food and fill the glasses. And sure enough, the fork and the knife began to rise in the air, and Mary kept up a constant stream of talk and conversation. "Are the potatoes done to your liking, madam? And, oh, please, will you have some more sherry? And how do you like the roast beef?" Well, after that, the ghost of the squire's mother was very pleased with Mary, and we'll see what happens as a result of that. Now, a few days later, the squire had been gone for the day and overnight on business. And Mary was alone in the parlor cleaning the grate when she heard a "woo," and she looked around, and there was a shaft of light coming from under the parlor door. And as she watched, the shaft moved forward and became vertical, and then it filled out until there before her stood the ghost of the squire's mother. "Good day, madam. Can I help you?" "Yes, you can, and I would like to help you," said the squire's mother. "You were very civil to me. You're a very polite girl, and I want you to follow me down to the cellar." "All right, I'll get a candle," said Mary. "No, you won't need that. I give off my own unholy glow." And so she followed her down the stairs and to the left and to the right through the dark cellar until they came to a dark corner, and there were some loose tiles in the corner. And the ghost instructed Mary to lift them up, and there were two large bags. One was very big and one was a little smaller, and the ghost of the squire's mother said, "Both bags are filled with gold. I died before being able to tell my son where they were, and that's why I could not rest. So you give my son the larger bag, and please keep the smaller bag for yourself. Will you do that?" "Oh, certainly, madam." "Then thank you, I can go." And with that, the ghost of the squire's mother was gone, leaving Mary in total darkness at the far corner of the cellar. But Mary wasn't afraid of anything, and she hid the gold again and found her way back upstairs. Now the next day, when the squire came home, Mary said, "I've had a visitation from your mother, and she wants you to follow me down to the cellar." So he followed her down the stairs and to the left and to the right. This time they had a candle. And when she came to the loose tiles, she pulled them up and took out the two bags of gold. And she said, "Your mother said I was to have the larger bag, and you the smaller." And the squire was delighted and very grateful, but he did say to himself, "My mother might have given me the larger bag." But he was so impressed with Mary that not long after that, he asked her to marry him. She was not only dauntless, but very pretty besides. And Mary said yes, happily. And the two were married and lived happily together till the end of their days. And, as it turns out, the squire got the large bag of gold too. So that's the story of the Dauntless.